Congratulations, true crime addicts. We've survived another week. It is Friday, May 23rd, 2025. This week, 10 inmates escaped from prison in Louisiana. What Diddy did that's really gross. And Aunt Bev scolds the jury. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Yes, super excited. We are all pumped to have James Renner.
James Renner on.
That James Renner has zeroed in on.
James Renner once again drops a bombshell.
Investigative journalist, reporter, James Renner, who's been on the podcast, longtime friend of mine.
And welcome back to True Crime This Week with me, your host, James Renner. That's the James Renner, but oh, it's a little defective this week. Hey, before we get started, I just wanted to thank everybody for tuning in. The audience for the show has doubled in the last couple months, so now 2 of you are watching. Heyo. Where's the drum thing? It's not here. I don't have money for that, but no. Seriously though, the audience has doubled. I'm very happy with the numbers. So thanks for tuning in. If you're new to the show, True Crime This Week brings you the true crime stories you might have missed during the last week. You don't even have to read the news. Just tune in on Friday mornings and I'll fill you in on all the true crime nitty gritty that you might have not had time to listen to. And don't bother with NPR or Fox News or any of that. The true stuff is here. Thanks for tuning in. I am, as I said, James Renner. I am a journalist, a storyteller. I write true crime. I write some novels occasionally. I'm probably mostly known for my books on Maura Murray, Amy Mihalovic, Lisa Pruitt. I had a new book that came out this year called Scout Camp, if you're into that. True story about creepy secret societies within the Boy Scouts. So that's what I do. If you are into those sorts of stories, check out jamesrenner.com for all your James Renner needs. And yeah, so thank you. Welcome. And as always, I want to thank my buddy Walter for manning the camera. Walter's just back from the Cannes Film Festival, where his film Escape from Sesame Street earned a 20-minute standing ovation. Congratulations, Walter. Let's get to the top stories. This week's edition of the Karen Reed trial could be titled The Prosecution Strikes Back, as Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan called a couple important witnesses who offered testimony that supports the state's theory that Karen Reed purposefully backed her SUV into her boyfriend, police officer John O'Keefe, and left him to die in the snow. However, there was also plenty of the unexpected drama we've come to expect from this case. On Wednesday, Yale-educated brain surgeon Isaac Wolfe, who looks exactly like the supernatural bad guy from David Lynch's Lost Highway, testified that he believed John O'Keefe died from falling back and hitting his head on the frozen ground. Quote, the only way he could get this kind of injury was to fall backwards, hit the back of his head, and then the resulting energy forces going into his brain into the base of his skull, end quote, said Dr. Wolfe, according to the New York Post. He said he'd treated many patients with similar injuries throughout his career. Immediately after his testimony, the state called Christina Hanley to the stand. She works for the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab and is an expert on glass and plastic fragments. She tested that plastic debris that was found on O'Keefe's clothing after his death and found that it was consistent with materials used in the Lexus that Reed was driving at the time. Some pretty good evidence, some pretty good testimony. But on cross, defense attorney Alan Jackson got Hanley to admit that none of the glass fragments that were found on Reed's bumper matched the shattered cocktail glass found near his body. In fact, the only thing that glass matched to was another sample that was recovered by disgraced trooper Michael Proctor, who the defense alleges planted evidence at the scene. Proctor was seen on camera doing some shady shit behind Karen's vehicle when it was parked at the station. He was fired after the first trial for his behavior. But the prosecution also had its fair share of mistakes this week. On Tuesday, they called forensic analyst Shannon Burgess to the stand. That's Shannon with one N. Get it right. Burgess works for Aperture, a company that does forensic reconstructions of crimes. It was his job to look at the black box data from Reed's Lexus and the cell phone data from O'Keefe's phone and compare them. Now, this is an important bit of evidence in the case, as previous timelines showed that O'Keefe's cell phone was moving around after Reed had already left the scene, suggesting he was alive when she went home. But 2 weeks ago, Burgess submitted a supplementary report claiming that he discovered data that showed O'Keefe's phone actually stopped moving directly after Reed backed up her vehicle. At first, this seemed like damning evidence of Karen Reed's guilt. But then, defense attorney Bob Alessi had a chance to cross-examine Burgess. Alessi had come to court that day to chew bubblegum and destroy expert witnesses, and he was all out of bubblegum. In short order, Alessi got Burgess to admit that he'd greatly inflated his credentials and resume. As it turned out, Burgess did not even have a bachelor's degree, even though his bio on Aperture's website indicated he did. Burgess admitted he'd been slowly working toward a degree for the last 17 years. Where is he getting this degree? Tri-C? I don't know. Burgess also admitted that this was the first time in 10 years that he'd written a supplementary report. A report, by the way, which listed the wrong date for the alleged accident, which Burgess said was just, quote, parlance, end quote, which reminds me of the old Inigo Montoya quote from Princess Bride, "That word you keep using, I do not think it means what you think it means." I can't do impressions. That's the best I got. There was one other odd moment in court this week. On Wednesday, Judge Beverly Cannoni announced that an issue had been brought to her attention and she had to speak to each juror individually. She ordered the cameras turned off and sent the press away as she brought each juror over to her bench one at a time. At this point, the public doesn't really know what was so important to cause the judge to speak to each juror, but the leading theory is that a juror had discussed the case outside the courtroom, an infraction that could potentially lead to a mistrial. Or maybe she was just seeing if they were interested in her Airbnb. Anyways, when court resumed, 2 of the jurors had swapped seats, according to 10 Boston. One of those jurors had been seen having a giggle attack during testimony earlier in the week. I think we've all been there. Next week, expect the state to rest its case and the defense to begin calling their own witnesses to support their theory that O'Keefe's death was a cover-up by the Boston police. Last Friday, 10 inmates escaped from the Orleans Parish Justice Center in Louisiana, and 5 are still on the run, according to NBC News. The inmates were able to pull a toilet from a wall and then climb through the hole, which allowed them to get outside, where they scaled a fence and used blankets to climb over the barbed wire to freedom. Their escape went unnoticed for several hours, and when corrections officers finally looked in the cell, they discovered graffiti on the wall above the hole reading, quote, "We innocent," and, quote, "Too easy, LOL. By the way, 2 was spelled T-O. Stay in school, kids. This is a colossal failure on the part of the jail in the state of Louisiana, and the fallout has led to the arrest of several other individuals charged with helping and aiding their escape. Following the escape, prosecutors charged jail maintenance worker Sterling Williams with principal to simple escape and malfeasance in office. They alleged that he cut off the water so that the inmates could pry the toilet out of the wall. But Williams' lawyer says he turned off the water to deal with a clogged toilet. The state police arrested 32-year-old Courtney Harris and 38-year-old Corvante Baptista and charged them with being accessories after the fact. They alleged that Harris was in contact with an inmate before the escape and then transported 2 of those fugitives to locations around New Orleans. Police say Baptista provided food to one of the inmates while he was hiding in her house. The 5 still on the run are 26-year-old Lenton Van Buren, 32-year-old Antoine Massey, 27-year-old Derek Groves, 31-year-old Leo Tate, and 42-year-old Jermaine Donald. But here's a fact that seems to be missing from many of the news reports on this case. These 5 men are not actually convicts. They were in jail awaiting trial and sentencing on serious crimes, and only there because they could not afford bail. In nearly every other developed country, they would have not been in jail to begin with. They are, after all, innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. They are prisoners only because they are poor. Want to hear a frightening statistic? In the United States, as of 2022, there were over 466,000 people in jail awaiting trial, a figure that makes up 70% of the total population of incarcerated individuals. Think about that. The majority of people sitting in jail are awaiting their court hearings. They're still innocent until proven guilty, and they're locked up. That's the way it works here. Nearly 500,000 legally innocent people are currently being held prisoner in a country that still charges for freedom. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. But that's insane. It's insane. Earlier this week, I watched Sarah Silverman's new Netflix stand-up special, Post-Mortem, where she talks about the recent deaths of her father and stepmother. I'm a huge fan of Silverman's. Her humor is usually shocking and controversial, but this time she was surprisingly sweet for the most part and told many funny stories about her larger-than-life father who owned a discount furniture store in New Hampshire, and he made silly commercials. You could see where she got her sense of humor. What does this have to do with true crime, you ask? Well, Rolling Stone interviewed Sarah Silverman for the new special, and during the interview, she talked about a terrible crime that has been a family secret for many years. Silverman had a brother, Jeffrey, who died when he was just 3 months old. At the time, her parents had left the young boy in the care of Silverman's grandfather, that's her father's father, so they could go on a trip. While they were gone, the boy died. The official story was that he'd slipped in the crib and suffocated, but there was never a lawsuit against the crib manufacturer or anybody. In the interview, Silverman says that before he died, her dad confided in her that he suspected his father flew into a rage and shook the baby until it died. Apparently, her grandfather was very abusive when her dad was growing up. Of course that's what happened, Silverman said. I think it's very true what they say about comedy being the byproduct of tragedy. So many famous comics have lived through terrible circumstances and learned to use it as a tool to cope. Google Stephen Colbert, for instance. But I think it's great progress that we live in a time where these things can be shared on a public stage instead of remaining secret forever. You have to wonder how many times this has happened. Those are the top stories. I'm going to be right back after this break. I've got a story about a guy who tried to escape the feds using a submarine. We got to talk about Diddy. Lots more to come. I'll be back in 2 and 2.
Please hang up and try again.
And we're back with more True Crime This Week, brought to you by Nintendo's Virtual Boy. Welcome to reality. Yesterday, the Justice Department announced that a North California man has pleaded guilty to running a $35 million Ponzi scheme, but it's the method he used to try to escape arrest that's getting attention. 48-year-old Matthew Piercy has been convicted of 27 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and witness tampering, and faces up to 20 years in prison for each count, according to CBS News. Prosecutors say that between 2015 and 2020, Piercy ran an investment fund where he solicited millions of dollars from customers who believed he was using trading algorithms to conquer the stock market. But it was all a lie. The fund never existed, and by the time they caught him, $26 million had vanished. Piercy knew he was cooked. When the FBI came to arrest him in November 2020, he led the police on a chase before abandoning his truck near Shasta Lake, where he jumped onto a submersible scooter, a mini submarine. I guess his plan was to disappear into the lake like James Bond, but maybe he forgot that it's a lake, and you could surround the lake with lots of law enforcement people. Anyways, he gave up after 20 minutes and came to shore where he was immediately handcuffed. It will likely stand as the most embarrassing thing done with a submarine since the production of Down Periscope, starring Kelsey Grammer and Rob Schneider. Strange story out of Texas this week. Around 11 a.m. last Friday, several people in Houston called 911 after witnessing a hit and run. Police were able to track down the driver, who explained that he had been hired to help a guy move and then discovered a dead body in one of the boxes. He then understandably tried to leave, only to have the guy who hired him, 36-year-old Stephen Eberly, jump into the bed of his truck to try to stop him, or maybe murder him. Eberle fell out of the truck when the driver crashed before fleeing the scene. The police quickly arrested Eberle and charged him with murder, according to Law and Crime. Police quickly learned that the victim was a contractor named Luis Silva Mendez, and he'd been remodeling Eberle's bedroom. Who knows what led to the altercation that ended his life? A grouting issue, perhaps, but Eberle allegedly stabbed Silva Menendez to death and attempted to dispose of his body. Just an FYI here, this murder happened in the 4000 block of Tim Allen Court, which is named after the absolute worst contractor in sitcom history. It's true, by the way. Tim Allen Court. Weird. Jurors in the ongoing trial of Sean Itty Bitty Diddy Combs for sex trafficking heard some more shocking testimony this week. But the most disgusting detail emerged during testimony from his former employer, George Kaplan, yesterday. Trigger warning here for anyone who is easily grossed out. Kaplan testified that Combs put applesauce on his cheeseburgers. This is true, and 2 people have testified to it in court. The New York Post even describes one juror as making a gagging gesture. Look, I don't know if Combs is guilty. He probably is, but this applesauce thing proves he's a total sociopath. The family of Jennifer Kesse says authorities are closing in on a suspect, according to NBC2 out of Orlando. Jennifer was 24 years old when she vanished on January 23, 2006. She was last seen leaving work around 6 p.m. She spoke with her boyfriend over the phone around 10 p.m. that night, but the next morning she was gone and her car was missing. Police believe she was abducted on her way to work that morning. Her car was eventually discovered at a nearby apartment complex, and when police viewed surveillance footage, they saw a person parking her car and then walking away. But unfortunately, that person's face was obscured by a fence. If you're into true crime, you've probably seen this footage. It is so frustrating to watch. Like, they have this surveillance footage that looks through this fence, and this guy, we don't even really know if it's a guy. It's probably a guy. But they walk, and you see their stride, but there's a fence pole blocking their face, and then the next frame in that footage, he's like behind another pole in the fence. It's like the worst coincidence ever. Like, other than that, we'd be able to see their face. It's crazy. Anyways, she's presumed to be dead, but her body has never been found. On Tuesday this week, what would have been her 44th birthday, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement announced that they had spoken to 45 people since the case was turned over to them in 2022, and that they have identified several persons of interest. Her father, Drew Kess, said, quote, "Overall, things are moving forward. I heard it in their voice. They're excited, and they truly believe that they're finally doing the right thing for Jennifer," end quote. Let's jump over to weird news, shall we? Guards working at the Pocoche Penitentiary in Costa Rica captured a hardened criminal attempting to deliver illegal drugs to inmates on the inside after scaling a barbed wire fence, according to the Mirror. Luckily, they were able to detain the drug runner and promptly give him scritches. Turns out the drug runner was a house cat. Someone had strapped bags to its back that contained 236 grams of marijuana and 68 grams of heroin. The Costa Rican Ministry of Justice is now attempting to track down its owner. Meanwhile, the culprit, identified as Sir Jonathan Longwhiskers, is seeking treatment for catnip addiction. Hopefully he'll use this as motivation to turn his life around. Over to pop culture. HBO Max has a new 2-part documentary out this week about the bizarre fake kidnapping of Sherry Papini, called Sherry Papini Caught in a Lie. Often called the real-life Gone Girl, Papini went missing for 3 weeks in 2016 before resurfacing, claiming she had been held captive by 2 Hispanic women who chained her to a wall. Everyone kind of knew she was lying, though, and she was finally arrested in March 2022. At her sentencing hearing, she admitted her story was a hoax, and she'd really run off with her ex-boyfriend, James Reyes. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison, but was let out after less than a year. According to TMZ, Pini now claims that Reyes kidnapped and abused her. But Reyes has never been charged with a crime and denies all these claims, and well, Pini really likes to lie. Apparently she'll take a lie detector test during the show, so we'll see if she admits to making that up as well. And the true crime book of the week this week is Murder in the Dollhouse, the Jennifer Dulos story by Rich Cohen. Here's the write-up. A nail-biting, edge-of-your-seat investigation into the mysterious disappearance of Jennifer Dulos and the aftershocks that rattled a wealthy suburb. Rich Cohen's Murder in the Dollhouse is the chilling, unputdownable story of Jennifer Dulos, a beautiful, rich, suburban mother who dropped her kids off at the New Canaan Country School one morning and vanished. Her body has never been found. Dulos was in the midst of an ugly divorce, one of the most contentious in Connecticut state history. The couple, a beautiful, highly connected pair, met at Brown University, had 5 children, and led what appeared to be a charmed life. In the wake of her disappearance, Dulos' husband and his girlfriend were arrested. He killed himself on the day he was supposed to report to court. She was tried and convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. A gripping story of status, wealth, love, and hate, Murder in the Dollhouse peers beneath the sparkling veneer of propriety that surrounded the Duloses to uncover the origins and motivations of a crime that has become a national obsession. I kind of like the true crime stories that dive into like the underbelly of rich communities. I kind of touched on it with Little Crazy Children and Shaker Heights, but it's not quite there. My favorite is the Murder in Greenwich, about the Kennedy case. You just do something about that. Like, this place is supposed to be perfect, but under the surface, there's evil. Because there often is. So, yeah, anyways, that's the show. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back next Friday morning, same show, same bat channel. And in the meantime, go out and enjoy the weather. It's Memorial Day. Go out, open the pool, for God's sakes. And in the words of the incomparable Murray Saul, we gotta. Get down, damn it. True Crime This Week is a Fearful Symmetry production. Photo and artwork are licensed through Shutterstock. If you like the cut of my jib, I have another podcast you might enjoy called The Philosophy of Crime, in which I attempt to solve the big questions behind our true crime obsession by looking to philosophy for answers. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Sit, Brownie, sit. Good dog.